Good morning, I'm Arabelle McClure.
And I'm Killian McMahon.
Alice Paul, an iron-jawed angel. I never doubted that equal rights was the right direction. Most reforms, most problems are complicated. But to me, there's nothing complicated about ordinary equality. Alice Paul.
Alice Stokes Paul and her associate Lucy Burns were revolutionary suffragist leaders in Washington, D.C. during the early 1900s. They changed the methods of protesting with their aggressive but nonviolent tactics. By organizing their own suffrage association, the National Woman's Party, which protested by picketing the White House, they became highly influential in the movement.
Paul and Burns were key players in the passage of the 19th Amendment on June 4, 1919, finally granting women the right to vote and thus leaving their legacy. Without their tireless efforts, women may not have the right to vote today. I was raised a Quaker in Moorestown, New Jersey. It was because of this that I always seemed to believe in equality. As I was growing up, my mother attended many suffragist speeches and took me with her. I was fascinated by how these strong women stood up for their cause despite the struggles they had to face.
In the 1800s, women were generally stereotyped as the lesser gender. They didn't share many of the rights that men were able to enjoy, including the right to vote. When abolitionist women like Elizabeth Cady Stanton tried to speak out in the anti-slavery movement, they were silenced. So they started a movement of their own.
On July 19th and 20th, 1848, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, and Lucretia Mott held the first suffrage meeting ever at the Seneca Falls Convention in Seneca Falls, New York.
This fostered a chain of suffrage movements, including the formation of the National American Women's Suffrage Association, or the NAWSA. Although people of the time period saw women's suffrage as an unimportant issue, suffragists kept trying.
While these events were occurring in the United States, Alice left for England to continue her education. There will never be a new world order until women are a part of it. Alice Paul.
Alice moved to England in 1907 to continue her studies in social work. While there, she met Emmeline and Christabel Pankhurst, militant British suffragists who introduced her to the movement.
From the Pankhursts, Alice learned methods of protest that she would continue to use for several years.
She began by passing out newspapers to spread the word of suffrage. Later, she would use stronger methods. She would dress up as a scrub woman, break into government meetings and yell,
"What about votes for women? What will you do for women's suffrage?"
However, suffragists were greatly opposed in England as well as America, and Alice was jailed several times there. During one of her times in a London police station, she met Lucy Burns, who would later become her partner.
I noticed that Miss Burns had a little American flag pin on her coat, so I went up to her. We became great friends, allies, and comrades.
In 1910, Alice and Lucy moved back to America together.
We women of America tell you that America is not a democracy. 20 million women are denied the right to vote. Alice Paul. When Alice and Lucy moved back to America, they joined the NAWSA together, and in 1913, Alice met with Carrie Chapman Catt, one of the leaders of NAWSA, to take control of the Congressional Committee. My colleague Lucy Burns and I would like to take control of the Congressional Committee to lobby Congress for the right to vote.
The right to vote? Don't you think that's an unrealistic goal?
Not at all.
Ms. Paul, I'll have you know that the NAWSA is not a militant organization. We will not stand for the kind of protesting performed in England.
I understand. In fact, I hope to organize a parade to peacefully protest.
That would be wonderful, so long as you and your partner raise all the funds yourselves.
We will. Thank you.
The parade Alice organized was held the day before President Woodrow Wilson's inauguration in 1913 and was extremely successful for spreading the word of suffrage. However, many anti-suffragists violently protested, sending over 100 women to the hospital.
The parade also angered many African-American suffragists who were asked by some of the other organizations participating in the parade to march in the segregated unit. Ida B. Wells, one of the leaders in African-American suffrage, was enraged by this. Hello, I'm Ida Wells.
Lucy Burns.
I received news that I, along with other African-American suffragists, will be asked to march in a separate unit of the parade. We wish to march alongside our fellow suffragists. We are all in this fight together, are we not?
We too wish for you to march with us during the parade. However, several other organizations involved have threatened to withdraw if you do so.
I expected more of you and Miss Paul. Good day. As time went by, tensions continued to grow between Alice, Lucy, and Carrie. And because of their differences of opinion on how to approach suffrage, Alice and Lucy were forced to leave the NAWSA, but they would not be defeated.
In 1917, Alice, Lucy, and their colleagues from the Congressional Committee formed the National Woman's Party, and Alice was elected to be their leader. Inez Milholland, a member of the party, left for Los Angeles to give a speech for suffrage. Mr. President, how long must women wait for liberty?
In In the middle of her speech, Inez collapsed from exhaustion and was rushed to the hospital. She died 1 month later. As a tribute, the NWP created signs featuring her famous last words and used them when protesting. The National Women's Party is made up of women of all races, creeds, and nationalities working together on the one principle of working to raise the status of women. Alice Paul.
In 1917, the party knew they had to do something drastic to make a change.
After the United States entered World War I on April 2nd, anti-suffragists believed that suffragists would never protest during wartime.
However, Alice did not give up. She and the party decided to controversially picket the White House, something that had never been done before.
We began for 8 hours a day, protesting by holding signs with radical messages of protest.
We were first arrested on the charge of obstructing traffic. What are you doing? You can arrest us. We've done nothing wrong. We were given the option to either pay a fine or spend 60 days in the Occoquan workhouse in Virginia. We refused to pay anything as we had done nothing wrong. Alice was sentenced to 7 months.
In jail, I was sent to a psychiatric ward. I think they were trying to discredit me, so that the other leaders of the party would say, well, we had better sort of disown this crazy person. But they didn't. I was force-fed 3 times a day through a tube up my nose. It was incredibly uncomfortable. This went on for weeks.
While Alice and the others suffered in the workhouse, they began to protest for their release. They claimed that they were political prisoners and demanded to be treated as such. On November 15th, 1917, they were brutally beaten and abused by the guards. Lucy was even handcuffed to the top of her cell and forced to hang there. This horrible night is now known as the Night of Terror.
After these events, the suffragists still remained undaunted. As word spread of their protests through hunger strikes, they were given the nickname Iron-Jawed Angels. On November 27th and 28th, they were finally released from jail, and in January 1918, President Wilson announced his support for suffrage. The movement had never looked brighter.
On June 4th, 1919, Alice, Lucy, and millions of women all over the country rejoiced. Because of the combined efforts of the NWP and the NASA, Congress had finally decided to pass the 19th Amendment, granting women the right to vote.
The 19th Amendment states that the right of citizens of the United States shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. This amendment was ratified by 36 states, the exact number needed to ratify it at the time on August 26, 1920.
In 1923, Alice wrote the Equal Rights Amendment, or the ERA.
I believed it was the next step in guaranteeing justice under the law for all citizens, male and female. I kept fighting for it for the rest of my life.
In 1974, Alice suffered a debilitating stroke. Despite her failing health, she kept fighting. Around this time, 35 states had ratified the ERA, just 3 short of the required number. To this day, the ERA has still not been ratified.
Alice died in 1977 at the age of 87, but her legacy still lives on today. Alice Paul was an extremely influential figure in the women's rights movement.
Her militant protest strategies were uniquely effective in gaining women the right to vote.
Her efforts and the efforts of other organizations, like the NASA, helped pass 2 amendments to help women be treated as equals to men.
Alice worked with the Pankhursts, the NASA, and created the National Women's Party to help fight for the rights she believed women deserved. Because of Alice, women have the right to vote, and we live in a more equal society today.
Alice even had an institute founded in her name for the things she did. Her face was also put on a special $10 coin. Alice Paul is an American hero who deserves to be recognized for her work in women's rights.
Alice was part of first wave feminism. Second wave feminism occurred in the 1960s and 70s and was based around women's liberation and passing the ERA. We are in third wave feminism today. Although Alice worked tirelessly throughout her lifetime for equality, we still haven't quite achieved her dream.
So we will keep fighting until the day that women and men are not seen as just women and men, but as equal humans.
Alice Paul's leadership as a revolutionary suffragist left a legacy of inspiration and a dream of equality.
I never doubted that equal rights was the right direction. Most reforms, most problems are complicated, but to me there's nothing complicated about ordinary equality. Alice Paul, an iron-jawed angel.